Good afternoon and a warm welcome on behalf of our Cowrie Scholars, our ambassadors, our trustees and our advisors. Thank you for coming to a sense of belonging here at King's College. We're grateful to Dean and the team for providing this wonderful venue, and most importantly, thank you for your time for today. So my name is Richard Oreffo. I'm the founder of the Cowrie Scholarship Foundation, and what I'd like to do is give you an update on where we are, our next steps, and how you can help. So the vision is straightforward. We want to help over 100 talented, disadvantaged Black British students through education. We want to be able to empower them by funding their living costs, by funding their tuition fees, and with a robust mentorship program, all achieved in partnership with universities and with business. Many of the universities are here, and some of the businesses are here today. Why Cowrie? It's important to realise that Black and minority students are significantly underrepresented at our highly selected universities. It's important to realise there is an 18-point attainment gap in degrees between first and 2-1 between our Black and white peers. You're 5 times, think about it, 5 times more likely to enter a high-tariff university if you live in an affluent area engaged in education than if you live in a deprived area. For the business community, equity, diversity and inclusion matter. Most of you probably know that organisations where indeed they have a diverse leadership, then innovation is enhanced, retention of talent is enhanced, attraction of talent is enhanced, and if nothing else, in terms of GDP, the cost is significant, 24 billion. And in terms of the best performing businesses, those with a diverse executive team, far more improved performance. We're fortunate to have Adrian Lester as our patron. We have Professor David Chargo, Dr. Mary Stewart, Jeff Palmer, Martin Ephson. Martin is here today as our ambassadors. We have a full trustees board, AJ, Tosha, Chelsea, Kayode, Tim, Sadia, Naomi. Most of them are in the room. And we're fortunate to have business advisors, Jim McCoy from TradeWeb, Celia Fraser from Capital Group. Celia is here. We have Elizabeth Riley from the Moore Partnership giving us philanthropic advice. Liz is here. And we have Ikena Achilonu from London School of Economics giving us guidance on scholarship, and he's here as well. So the strategy is simple. We partner with the universities cover the tuition fees. We need the donors and the business to help us provide the living costs, and we have that wraparound support in terms of mentorship. So what's our impact? Well, as of October last year, we had 33 scholars in program, 26 universities who've committed 3.5 million, and we have 6 corporate partners. These are our partner universities, 26 partner universities, and they have committed 3.5 million to cover the tuition fees of 118 students in the coming decade. We have 6 major corporates, Unilever, Oxford, Jacobs, Capital Group, AstraZeneca and TradeWeb, as well as support from the London Stock Exchange Group, Goldman Sachs, ExxonMobil, Enterprise, JK, and Renewables and Diverse Minds. Mentorship matters. Black British students are more likely to drop out of university. More likely to be awarded, as I mentioned, a 2, 2 or a third, which has an impact in terms of progression, in terms of higher education progression, in terms of starting salary. So mentorship is a really important component of our program. One of my favourite slides, this is when we met up in Edinburgh, and we're delighted to have today Ganray, Kezia, Lydia, Mariana, Miranda, Salome, Shania, Tiana, and Aisha. They're in the room here today. So, our target, why we're here, let's cut to the bottom line. I was saying this to Tiffany earlier, let's cut to the chase. We want 18 new scholars to start this October. 85,000 will enable us to ensure all 18 complete their degree, any degree, once they're accepted at that university. We provide £8,000 per year to our students outside London and £10,000 per year to our students within London. We want to unlock all 118 Cowrie Scholars. We want to expand our platform to 125. We want to expand our corporate partnerships, internships, workshops, and next year we'll see our first cohort graduate. We want an alumni network. So what can you do? Okay, there's no such thing as a free lunch. Spread the word, become a partner, introduce us to your network. Mentors. We will have 51 scholars this year. We need 100 mentors. Share your expertise, workshops, internships, and of course, company schemes, salary sacrifice, financial, fundraise, donate. So, you can be the difference. I always end, everyone knows this, with my favourite quote, Nelson Mandela. Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. And I truly believe that. Full programme for you. In a moment, we will have the debate, the key item, and then, of course, our Cowrie Scholars for about 20 minutes. We'll then have a little business panel, a Q&A so you can ask us any questions, and then we'll have a wrap-up with Martin and myself, and you can all speak. But before we do any more, it's my great pleasure to introduce Esther Mark from DebateMate, and we will start proceedings today on... Esther, I'll leave it to you. I won't steal your thunder.
Thank you very much, Richard. Delighted to be here. I wish I had a little bit of that jazz music in the background. I feel like I'm going to be your late night radio host today. But welcome. My name is Esther, and I'm here representing DebateMate. So, can we get a raise of hands of anybody who has heard of DebateMate before? Oh, a few. Fantastic. Not my own team over there on the side. Fired. So, for those of you who have not heard of DebateMate, we are a global social business focusing on education, there to make impact and increase social mobility. So what we basically do, very similar to Cowrie, is have mentors who are university students, a lot of who do go to actually King's College, and they go into schools after school to teach young people debating. Yes, we do have incredible debaters that come out of the program, some of which you will see today, but what we are really trying to do is increase social mobility by giving young people those key 21st century skills that they need. Of course, critical and analytical thinking, teamwork, and above all, a core confidence. So, what we are here to do is showcase a debate, to talk about a topic that we are all probably sick to death of talking about, right? But our speakers are going to put their own new spin on it. Our speakers are comprised of some former DebateMate students, current DebateMate students, and also industry experts, and I will be hosting and chairing the debate. So, the motion, which is basically the topic for the debate, is: this House believes that representation is the most effective way to get Black British students through the door. And when we say through the door, that's basically a really short way of saying into higher education and into business. But that is just way too long for me to actually say without messing up, so we're going to go through the door. So, without further ado, I would like to welcome our speakers onto the stage. Please give them a round of applause. To the debate. I am on strict orders when it comes to timing, so if somebody gets flung into the audience at 1:10 please try and catch them. I'm under strict orders from Richard. So So how is this actually going to work? As you can see, we have 6 speakers. On my left-hand side, we have got the proposition, and then we also have the opposition as well. So one side is going to be for the motion, in agreement. They do believe that representation is the best way, and the other side is going to be saying no, they don't believe that representation is the best way. But don't worry, you're not just going to be passive listeners, you are actually going to be involved in this debate. So no heckling, but you will have the opportunity to ask some questions after the first 2 speakers from each side have made their speeches. We want to get you involved, we want to actually hear what you are thinking as well, so have those cogs whirring in your head, thinking about what you would like to contribute to today's debate. So, each of the speakers are going to have 3 minutes, and that is a strict 3 minutes. Okay, I'm looking at a couple people in particular who are used to speaking for about 8 minutes long in these debates. We don't have that today, okay? Each speaker is going to have 3 minutes. You may see the speakers being interrupted by somebody on the opposing side. Don't worry, you don't need to get security. That is actually allowed in this debate. It's called the point of information, and it's something that comes from the old school parliamentary form of debating, where people would interrupt each other to make a point. So those are basically the rules of the debate. But first of all, we want to see where everybody actually stands on this motion, whether people agree with the motion or actually disagree. So we're going to take a vote. I'm not going to count, somebody else is going to count for me. So let's get a raise of hands for people who actually agree with this statement. Yeah, I would hope you guys agree, because both of you are on that side. Okay. And all in disagreement? Okay, and people in the middle / you haven't voted? Okay, so we've kind of got everything to play for. We'll take a vote at the end of the debate as well to see if anybody has been swayed or persuaded. So, without further ado, let us begin the debate. So, on our first side for proposition, we have Emmanuel. Emmanuel was a former debate-mate student when he was in secondary school, and now he's going into his 3rd year doing computer science at the University of Nottingham. Emmanuel has debated extensively all around the world in all different venues, and you will see very shortly he's an incredibly impressive and energetic young man. He's also involved in the creative industry and did an internship with A Quiet Storm, and I would believe you were just at an event yesterday, day before that, doing his exams, so a real boss over here. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Emmanuel to the stage as our first speaker of the proposition. A round of applause.
It's always so flattering getting an introduction like that. It actually does make you very nervous. But today's motion is really important, and so I'm really excited to be talking to you guys. From the side proposition, my name is Emmanuel, and this side will be talking about why this House believes that actually representation is the most effective way to get Black British people through the door. So, as a team prop, first speaker, the first thing I'm going to be doing is defining my points teams. So, I will be talking about what representation can do on a larger scale. Portia will talk about the direct result of representation in terms of inspiration, and Ikenna will be summarising why we've already won this debate. There's 3 things I need to do. First, I need to define representation, then establish the problem that actually both teams are trying to tackle here, which is kind of cool. We're kind of on the same team, but you know, we're going to win. And begin to justify why representation is the most effective remedy for this problem. Now, first of all, the problem. Both teams are tackling this idea that presently, right now, Black Brits aren't getting through the door. The stats that we're hearing about 5 times more likely to, I think, get into uni, things like that. It's really shocking to hear these statistics. And actually, the door being positions of power, and the reason that we don't have this is currently because it's a manifestation of a systemic issue, and not just the result of like a few racists. So, defining representation. What we mean by representation, it's kind of like an encompassing notion, almost a tautology in the sense that if Black Brits are represented, Black Brits are already through the door, and then now it's a question of continuity. What actually that entails. So, justification, what that entails. Namely, inspiration all the way through to genuine systemic change. Systemic change is what I'll be talking about. You see, representation isn't just about a few individual Black successes. And I know Portia will be talking about inspiration, which is, direct correlation of representation. But actually, generally, as Black individuals gain representation in higher education, various positions of power, various professional fields, They influence policies, they can practice, they can create practices that are lasting, structural changes that benefit generations. Yes, please.
So how does that proposition intend to respond to the fact that, for example, in universities, there are several black lecturers and black leaders, yet black students are still likely to drop out, despite representation very much being there?
Yes, I think proposition, I'm not talking about representation in terms of, oh yeah, there's a couple of black people in the university, there's a few lecturers that are black. We're talking about actually represented, proportionately represented within the university in different positions. So of course lecturer is an important position. It's a position where you're teaching people, but I mean, I don't like my lecturers as much as other people don't like their lecturers. It's not necessarily about your lecturer being black, but actually black people being represented in all facets of the university. So they're influencing, for example, the hiring of more black lecturers, because it's interesting that you have black lecturers. I've not had any black lecturers. That's a direct problem with my attainment in university. I'm looking at my lecturers and going, this is not really for me. I don't really feel like that this is, you know what I mean? That I can go on to success so much so, as though if someone in that position of power, for example, lecturers, but also within the university in positions of power where we're electing black people who are actually trying to make change. I think again, lecturers are not the only situation where we can have black people. Just generally, having people in positions of power and different facets of professional walks and educational walks generally will influence systemic changes because it's a cycle that feeds itself. I've been the CF proposition, Emmanuel. Thanks for listening.
So much, Emmanuel, for that brilliant speech, interrogating what we mean by through the door, and actually how much representation is enough. Is it just about getting a few people there to be placeholders, or is it about the continuation? And as you saw, Kiana interrupted Emmanuel. That's what she was supposed to do, don't worry. Getting the speakers to actually engage with each other and in their arguments. You heard me do a couple of claps during that speech. It's not a nervous tick, I'm not just doing it for fun. That's to actually let the speakers know that they are in protected time and out of protected time, which basically means people can and can't offer interruptions, and also that they need to wrap up their speech as well. So now we're going to go over to the first speaker on side opposition. So this is Kalau. Kalau is one of our debate-based students on the grad program. So that's basically for students who have completed the secondary school program when they're in college and when they're in sixth form. So they can do more rigorous forms of debating, including British parliamentary debating, and that is something that Kalau does excellently. He recently got to the finals of the Durham Schools competition and was ranked the 6th best speaker in that competition as a whole. Out of hundreds of people, big people who are much older than him, he's 17, he was just smashing them completely. So, massive respect for Kalau over here. Testing.
Representation has been proven, has been sticking plaster and doesn't actually deal with the root issues of inequality and racism. In my speech, I'm going to be doing 3 things. First is saying why representation hasn't worked. Second is saying what the better resolutions are, like things like outreach programs. And third thing is saying what long-term impact of representation and outreach programs actually are there. Okay, starting with why representation hasn't worked historically then. We've seen recently with things like affirmative action, trying to introduce quotas to get people into employment or into universities in that case, has been not worked and hasn't been able to get things through bill. Why? Because there's an overemphasis on numbers when representation is the focus of a business. We know then that what actually happens on the ground is that when businesses focus on things like quotas, or when universities focus on getting numbers through the door and people into those positions, we see that then the focus becomes on that and severely just getting the numbers in, rather than on the root issues and the key issues that actually stop people from getting in the first place. So what does that then do? That means that the inequality that exists already, or the root issues that exist behind that number and behind the inequality, still continues to happen, and those root issues don't change. I'll take it in a second. So what is a better representation and what is a better alternative to then having quotas and then just pushing people into these roles. The best alternative is things like outreach programs, things like scholarships, and things like some financial support. Why? Because they more effectively deal with the inequality and the issues that actually stop people from getting into these positions in the first place. By enabling black people then be able to get into those positions and be competitive in those fields themselves, they're then better able to compete for these positions and better able to generate more representation themselves. Note then, the key bottom here is that by forcing representation in things like quotas, it then actually, while creating representation, doesn't deal with the core issue that stops black people from being able to get into those positions in the first place. That's better done through more root causes and more outreach programs and grassroots support, which allows people to be able to get those opportunities on their own. Take it away. Okay, seeing the POI then, moving on to what the long-term impact of that actually is then. Okay, so seeing that representation and then on their side, likely what happens when you have representation and quotas as a long-term resolution is you get representation through just having quotas and putting people in, but then you actually get tokenization and people seen as not actually being valued as members of their team, which my partner is going to be talking about more. But more importantly, by having representation, you don't actually end up dealing with the root issues and the core issues behind the lack of representation in the first place. You only do that when you focus on grassroots, when you work with schools and have things like partnerships with businesses. That's why programs like Cowrie have been able to be so successful, because they've been able to actually help people and deal with the root issues of underfunding and of people having low socioeconomic backgrounds. I'll take it.
Don't you think it's significant that, for example, the Cowrie Foundation, all the ambassadors were black? That's representation within black people as well. Isn't that still what we're arguing for us?
But note why that representation happens, right? The reason why a program like Cowrie works is because it ultimately provides funding and provides the route for black people to be able to get in those positions on themselves, rather than saying, okay, we've got a 50% quota of this, and then just putting black people in those positions. So note then, what we prefer on our side is simply the enabling of black people to be able to get in those positions on their own, rather than them being forced into it or having to just fulfill a quota. We want empowerment of black people to be able to pursue their own opportunities and be able to chase better lives for themselves. That's why I'm so proud to stand in opposition on this side of the debate.
17 years old. Woo! What were you guys doing at 17? I'm looking at anyway. I was playing in sand at 17. I wasn't like a lot at 17. Absolutely brilliant speech. And we have somebody next who is equally as impressive, and this is Portia. Portia is a Year 9 student on the Debate Make program, and this is her first ever showcase debate, so please show her lots of support. Incredibly impressive, and she first came to our attention as having so much potential as a speaker when recently she and her school, who were seated over here, won one of our final competitions. And as a result, she is going to be collaborating with Deloitte to create a podcast, and she is going to be the host of that podcast. So please give it up for Portia.
I'm Portia, I'm the second speaker. And I'll be touching on sort of representation and how sort of having inspirational people is a brilliant way to show representation with black students. I'd just like to start off with a rebuttal though for your first speaker. You said that representation hasn't worked and that outreach programs or things like that would be better. Well, I would disagree, as I would say that I am a living, breathing example of someone who has seen that representation has worked, because, I mean, I am 14. And already my father, who's a lawyer, I don't exactly want to go into law, but the fact that he has reached those goals and gotten into that profession on his own without, role models has given me the opportunity to go down the STEM route, which is where I would like to go down. So now I'm going to touch upon motivating people and sort of the way...
Point of information. So you mentioned representation and your father being a lawyer. Both of my parents are university lecturers. The number for black professors has been at 1% for as long as I can remember. I think my dad quoted that to me, age 6. I'm now 32. It hasn't changed. Can you explain why we haven't seen, despite having 1% back then, we haven't managed to improve that number?
So, well, the reason is that there aren't enough people. There aren't enough black people in these, as professors, as you said, like your parents are. And the fact is that there is not enough, encouragement for black people to get into those positions because in the first place they weren't black people to begin with. So it's a vicious cycle that in turn, you're not going to get the black people into that position because they weren't there in the first place. And so we were saying that it was like a 100-meter sprint, The runner, the first person who ran, they had to get through that 100 meters, but you are following that person, but you're going to have their shoes which are broken into. You know the shoes that they wore, you know the techniques that they were using, and therefore you have the correct resources to go down the same path that they did, but you can maybe correct their mistakes, and then you can end up being in that position, which means that more people can follow your shoes, in turn making sure that in going through the door, there are more black people in those positions because of this 100-meter sprint. Now, this will also change the culture of the way organisations work, because if you think about it, if there are more black people in those positions, it means that organisations will be taking notes as to why there are new ideas being brought to the table and things like this, which I think is really important because it means that we're not just getting the same ideas from the same kinds of people with the same kinds of faces. We're getting new people, we're getting new ideas, which means that we're sort of becoming progressive as a nation and becoming more progressive as people. Now, representation also means that the black British people will sort of feel motivated to reach high levels of success. Because if you have someone who is older than you, who's a mentor for you, then that, I guess, is more motivating for our team we were discussing, that the fact that you have somebody who has already gotten to that point in their career, you're able to reach those high levels because someone else has done it, because you can see the path that they've followed, which is, I think, great because you've seen that people have broken down barriers, and you've seen that people have done these things, because it's not just manufactured, people would have had to do it before you, and so having people to motivate you is the best way to go about it, is what we were saying, which is, like Emmanuel was saying, it's a tautology, by saying that, representation is breaking down barriers, it is going through the door, which is why I think that we've made the stronger argument, because, representation is key.
What were you doing at 14, guys? Portia, thank you so much for joining us. You just did something that is incredibly brave, and you were absolutely fantastic. And we can see your teacher and your schoolmates cheering you on there, being your biggest fan, so thank you so much. Okay, we've got one more speaker from the other side who is going to do their speech before we actually come over to you. So I just wanted to reiterate that these speakers have been put on these sides arbitrarily, okay? Particularly for the two people who are employed here. I don't want anybody to be getting fired, or don't worry. They've been put on these sides arbitrarily. They may not be sharing their full and complete opinions during this debate, but feel free to grab them after if you do actually want to hear what they think. So now we are going to be going over to our second speaker in the opposition, and our second speaker is Celia. Cecilia is somebody who has tons of experience being in the sector when it comes to representation, equality, and championing black people. So we're so delighted that Celia is joining us here today. She is a senior manager leading emerging capabilities and client experience for Europe and Asia Pacific at Capital Group. And she's dedicated to social justice. She is on the board of many charities and many organizations, including Cowrie. So thank you so much for being here, Celia, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. So I'm here to argue that representation is the outcome when we've succeeded in tackling the root causes as opposed to the starting point. If you look at today's MPs as an example, I'd say we have quite a good representation of some underrepresented ethnic groups. Have we seen improvement for those underrepresented ethnic groups? I think.
Point of information. What is good representation in the MPs?
I think if you look down at the breakdown of some of our senior cabinet members, you can look at our Prime Minister as one, we can look at the Women and Equalities Ministers, there's representation there that hasn't previously been seen in some of our cabinet members, so it's more proportionate, you could say, than what we've had previously. I think if you also look at representation alone, you put the onus on those underrepresented groups. So the point I made earlier about the 1% of professors, It's not through lack of trying from my parents, it's not through them not wanting to see more black professors, more black students. They aren't empowered. Again, that goes back to looking at the root causes and looking at the other senior leaders and looking at the accountability. Who's holding them accountable? Who's actually empowering people to make that change? So as you mentioned, the outreach programs, I think engaging, that should be something that's everybody's responsibility. The universities, societies and business is being mentioned. We only have black ambassadors. It's a starting point. So at Cowrie, we do have mainly black ambassadors. I can't lean on black people alone to help make that change. I go and speak to the leaders at my company, most of whom are white today. I'm a senior manager across a team of 250. I'm the only black woman in that senior management group. It's not through lack of trying.
So you said that a lot of your co-workers are white people, but do you think that that's not a bit demoralising that you're the only black person in that workspace?
Yes and no. I think things are changing, so one of the things I'm really keen to do is making sure that I improve what's happening for people behind me and giving back and reaching back. And what I think you see sometimes when you have representation, the job gets harder. People put up the ladders behind them, and actually then they put in policies or there's different things that happen which makes those coming behind them harder to follow in their footsteps. I think that needs to change.
Point of information, sorry, 2 quick points. I don't think a billionaire is representative of black people in the first place. I don't think they represent any parts of society for the real minority, more minority than black people. And it's actually not like that. So yeah.
That takes me on to very nicely to my next point. Thank you. You can't assume by just having someone there that they can speak for everyone. So my views won't be the same or representative to all black people. So by relying on representation alone, you're assuming that they then have everybody else's best interest at heart. That is not the case. It goes back to our other argument, you have to tackle the root causes, you have to get to systemic change, you cannot rely on representation alone to make sure that we're getting more black British students through the door. It's dedicated, it's deliberate, it's outreach from society, it's from universities, it's from business, and it's everyone's responsibility, not just the few black and brown faces that you see in power today. Thank you.
So much, Celia, a really powerful speech telling us that we cannot rely on black people alone. This needs to be a joint effort to actually increase the levels of diversity, not in a tokenistic way, but in a genuine way. Okay, as I said, we've had 4 speakers, 2 from each side. Now we are going to be opening up the floor to you. So you're going to see Maeve on my right and Liana over here as well, DebateMate employees who are going to be coming to you if you'd like to pose a question to the summary speakers of the prop and the opposition. They won't be answering the questions as you ask them, they will integrate them into the body of their speech. So let's see some hands if anybody would like to ask a question. And we do have a little incentive in case people need a little bit of a push to raise their hands and ask a question. And that is a voucher for your favorite food spot. We usually do Nando's. I promise it's not racially motivated. That is what we usually do, but today, we're going diverse. So you can get some food from Chiquitos, the last standing one in the whole of the UK. Five Guys, if you don't have a nut allergy. Pizza Hut, if you would like to be extorted. Cafe Rouge, if you would like to be in the company of tourists. Pizza Express, if you're a decent person, and so on. So, let's do it. Right there in the back. And when you get the microphone, just tell us your name, and we are going to have our DebateMate volunteers making a note of the names and of the questions.
My name is Leslie Coombs. My question is representation, and I apologize if you covered it, is representation strictly based on my gender, appearance, etc., or is representation maybe a bit wider? Because I think in my mind, I view representation as somebody who thinks it's important.
Lovely, thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Richard Cootie. So my question is, I've kind of got 2, sorry. if representation isn't the most effective way to get Black British students through the door, what is? And that method that you identify as being other than representation, would you identify it if you didn't have representation?
Thank you very much. Yes, over here.
Hello, my name is Shubi Tologunpolu. I am Jacobs. And I guess my question is more about, and I think it was alluded to by both sides, the definition of representation that you are debating about wasn't particularly stated, and I think that's where it comes in terms of good and bad representation. How do you know what good or bad is if you don't know what the criteria is? You know, the kind of motion against was more representation alone isn't good, but when you look at the kind of verb to represent, there's a lot more there that gives clues about what people might think of as kind of good and bad representation. So both books are really great, but I think that was something that I kind of noticed that, you know, it seemed like people were arguing about the same thing and agreeing for kind of the same things because they had different ideas of what representation was. So I guess, what's your definition?
Fantastic, thank you very much. Emmanuel was making in particular in the beginning. Do we want representation just for the sake of it, or do we actually care about the quality of the representation? Over here.
Hi, so PJ Qureshi, one of the trustees. This isn't really a question, it's just an observation. I noticed Celia nodding when the other side was actually making a point. I don't know whether she was in agreement with the other side.
The betrayal. Okay, as we said, we all have the opportunity to hear their true views at the end, so thank you. One over here, and then we've got a couple at the front over here as well. Yeah, just from here, and then we'll come back.
Hi, my name is Mariana Akinrinlalo with the Cowrie Scholars. From what I understood from the questions proposed is representation is like an umbrella term. So what is your definition as woman from Jacobs proposed is what is that subjected to you? And a following up question is, if you don't believe representation is the most effective, do you think equity or equality is the most effective way?
Thank you very much, Mariana. Okay, let's take one more. Yes, got one here and then right at the back.
Hi, my name is Kayode Akinrinlalo. I initially was on the point of representation, but Celia made a really good point when she was talking about the members of parliament and how we have quite good, quote-unquote, good representation of minority ethnic groups. But when you look at the way in which they're representing us or representing the country, do you feel like that is good representation? And do you think that having these faces in these spaces is enough to better our country or better our people? Or do you feel like extra steps need to be taken in order to actually make a change? Because like Celia said, like, just because their faces are there and we can see them doesn't mean that they have our best interests at heart. So I do feel like it is important to have other things in place to actually make tangible change. So do you feel like solely representation can do these things, or do you feel like there needs to be other things that are more important as opposed to just representation on its own?
Fantastic, thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Tamara. So to the point about representation, if that's the first step, how do we acknowledge the burden or harm of those one or two individuals when they're in systems or structures that aren't tackling those systemic issues? How do we protect them?
Thank you very much. We have lots of food for thought for the summary speakers. In a typical debate-based debate, we always start and end with the proposition. So we'll be switching the sides and going over to the opposition first. So, our summary speaker for the opposition is Kiana. This is a woman that truly needs no introduction. She is absolutely formidable. She was a former debate-based student. She's been a member of the youth parliament. In her spare time, She managed to train to be a solicitor as well. She's on the board of trustees for Debate Mate, and you will see why she's so exceptional. So please give it up for Kiana.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kiana, and I am the summary speaker for the opposition. I'm effectively here to tell you why we have won this debate and you should side with us. Now, I think it's really important that we clear up a few key things in this debate, and what I will do is, because we had so many wonderful comments from the floor, I'll have to respond to them before I get into my speech. So on side opposition, we very clearly want more black people through the door. We also believe that representation is important, and we also want to see more black British people and students thrive. But where we part ways in this debate is on the how and what is most effective. Now, turning quickly to the points raised on the floor. There were a lot of discussions and pointers on, but what exactly is representation? Now, at its very, very basic, representation is the existence of people who look like you, right? But this is what we're saying on side opposition where it becomes a bit problematic, because that in its basic level, when we now dig a bit deeper, means different things to different people. And then we see this buzzword of representation, all these D&I discussions, where you have people effectively saying, we have tons of people that look like you, that should be sufficient. But then the mere fact of this floor debate is indicative that representation, number one, can't be the most effective way if there isn't even an agreement on what that means. And number two, representation in and of itself is often used as a weapon to actually prevent individuals from doing the real work, which is changing the systems that have come to this point. And fundamentally, as the wonderful lady said at the back, ensuring that those who are the representation are not burdened with the problem of representing all. No, thank you. So, with that in mind, I think it's really important that we have a little honest chat, and I hope you don't mind if I get a tad bit personal. So as you can see, it's no surprise, I am indeed a black woman. I am a very proud British Jamaican woman who grew up in Brixton before it was the Brixton of the place where some of you might go to brunch today. And when I grew up in Brixton, I think it's also not a shock that I have on many of occasions been the only black individual. I trained as a ballerina back in the days, and there was just me, myself and I, with no nude tights and no nude ballet shoes. So I say that not to chat my business on the stage, but rather to set the scene for you. When I was training as a lawyer, I trained at a firm that won an award for having the most black trainees. It was all over LinkedIn, they had great infographic, and I want to let you know that when it came to the end of training, over 70% of those black lawyers were let go. And so therefore, when we talk about representation, we have to unpack this a little bit deeper. Because the reality is that what we're trying to get to when we're thinking about getting through the door is not having people just be there, but people feel comfortable there. Now, my team have told you, we've spoken about the issue of affirmative action, we've spoken about the issue with quotas, we've taken you through all of that. But what we actually say is the most effective way, not denying that representation is important, we actually say that we need sustainable change. And so where we get sustainable change is actually in systems where the cultural capital is what we're really talking about. It's not about whether I can go into an office and see someone that looks like me. It's about, can I go into an office and that person who looks like me has enough power to advocate for me, mentor for me, and open the doors for me. Because I have a mentor who is a black woman, but she is the only black partner in her entire European network for a global law firm. And so this is what we're saying on side opposition. We're saying that representation is important, but it's not the most effective. And what we want on side opposition is not for black people to just get through the door and stand awkwardly in the hallway. We want for black people to get through the door, kick off their shoes, and be able to sit down in the living room and make themselves at home. And the only way you can do that is going beyond just representation alone and actually creating programs, systems, and making sure that representation isn't just the burden for those who look like us, but that there is a collective responsibility that if this is a place that we all call home, then I deserve to relax just as much as you. And for all those reasons, I beg you to support side opposition and let's make some change. Thank you.
Woo! Literally, as is in the beginning, no words needed, apart from cross Brixton off your branch list. You need to go back to Richmond or somewhere else. Okay, we have our final speaker for today's event, and that is going to be Ekena. So, Ekena is a program manager for the Ugla Family Scholarship Program at LSE. He has a master's in education, and he has over a decade of experience developing and facilitating, specifically within the education sector, working and championing diversity, also working with Cowrie as well. Never done a debate before. He picked summary speaker, which, as you can see, is the hardest role because you don't get to prepare apart from when you are in this moment. So thank you so much, Ekena. The floor is yours to close the debate.
I'm going to represent the people who would sit down as we speak, so you can even visibly see a different representation and how that impacts you by seeing it. Anyways, I'm just going to jump right in and start with through the door. So we talked about through the door, and Esther greatly defined it as through business leaders and through government leadership. I think that is what we're talking about today. And we also talked about British students, right? So of course I understand the challenge for Black people in general. Yes, maybe having representation does not work in every sense, but when we're talking about through the door to businesses, different industries, different government offices, the way that that can happen in the best way is through representation. Protests are important. Fighting for equity is important. Institutional change has to happen, but we want that institutional to change with the people who we want representing us, making those decisions and having a seat at the table. And the only way they can do that is
Point of information.
Sure.
Let's think about it. So we're seeing more Black British students likely to go to university than their white counterparts, but then they leave. So if representation is the most effective way, why are those Black students leaving university once they've got there?
I agree. Representation is not the only thing that needs to happen. Along with representation, there needs to be a community of people who are supporting one another to ensure that they are looking out for one another. Because these spaces take time to change, culturally and institutionally.
Point of information. Going back to root cause and systemic change over representation is being more effective.
Going back to root causes, what do you mean by going back to root causes? Because going to root causes is you can do research on finding the root causes. You can go and protest about the root causes. Systemic change happens with actual people. Systemic change happens with actual people looking into the institutions, having knowledge of that institution, and then deciding how they want it to change. If nobody is in those institutions, we won't have the information, we won't have the knowledge, and we won't know how to change them. We won't be able to inform our communities to tell them how to change, and we won't have the motivation to create that sense of belonging within those institutions until we've been there. And so you originally said, your team originally said that affirmative action did not work. It did work. It did work, but it was challenged because it was working. Because there were people getting into leadership positions. Because there were changes happening, and certain people in positions of power did not want those changes to happen. And so it's important for us to continue that battle, continue the fight. Representation does not mean just people who look like us. We need all types of intersectional representation within these institutions. We need Black women, we need queer Black people, we need Black people with disabilities or handy-capable, and that is a spectrum of representation. We need people who have new ideas, and we all come to the space as Black people to figure out how can we change this institution. And so I think that's the most important thing. I wanted to touch also about the pressure, and I do think that there is pressure being one of the only ones. And there is some violence at times that comes with these diversity initiatives, that comes with people saying, you have to represent your entire community. I can't argue against that, right? During the Civil Rights Movement, Martin Luther King Jr., they tried to integrate schools. Those first students had the roughest go. It's just the truth. And I think that is something we need to acknowledge and something we need to protect those students and create systems within our communities, not by the institution policies, but within our communities to support one another. And I think that change does happen over time. And we've seen that in schools where integration did happen. I also want to say you can't speak for everyone. This is true. But that's why we need more people speaking. That's why we need more people from every corner of the UK, all the students from Wales, from Birmingham, from the north, from London, and from all different parts of the country speaking and having a seat at the table. Instead of arguing that the table isn't good enough for us, let's argue to make sure the table is big enough for us, for all of us. And I think I just want to say that we are not saying we rely on representation alone in this team. All of the outreach programs you've argued for, all of the systemic change and understanding the root causes are important and have to happen. But it is the best and most effective way right now for students to get in through the door. And through the door means going to leadership positions in business, leadership positions in government, leadership positions that will eventually have the power to change institutions and the root causes.
Thank you. A fantastic speech from, again, our first showcase debate. Absolutely smashed it. And a great point to actually end this debate on. Making sure the table is big enough for all of us and protecting the Black people who often go first. And that was a point that was mentioned in the floor debate, and that's why Tamara is our winner of the vouchers. For the final 30 seconds, let us do the vote. Please, everybody, do vote. Raise your hands, or actually, make some noise if you think the winners of this debate were the proposition. Were the opposition. Let's just call it 4852 and call it a day. Thank you so much, everybody, for attending this debate and this event. A massive thanks to Richard as well, who's put on a fantastic day today. Please feel free to grab any one of us during the networking. On behalf of myself and all of my team and DebateMate, thank you so much for being here, for fighting the good fight for social mobility. I'll be really keen to talk to you after. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Esther. And thanks to both debating teams. Okay, I'd like to move on with the programme. I'd like to call the Cowrie Scholars up to the table, please. And I'd like to introduce our Professor Kieran Trehan, Pro-Vice Chancellor, Partnership and Engagement, Professor of Entrepreneurship from the University of York, who will take the next session with our Cowrie Scholars. Professor Trehan.
What do the words of Maya Angelou, you might ask yourself, have to do with the next session? On a sense of belonging and what that means. For me, it's really clear what it means. Education is not a rational endeavour. Our scholars are not simply rational individuals. Never has a time been more important, as we've just seen. Education is a catalyst for change, but education on its own doesn't create a sense of belonging. It doesn't create a sense of purpose. It doesn't create a sense of community. That's why the scholars that you will hear today are they're here on purpose, for a purpose. And that lived experience of what it means to belong, to be part of a community, I thought was so powerfully articulated in the earlier session. And so without further ado, I want to make it absolutely painfully clear before we hear from their powerful and lived experiences that education isn't a luxury. Education is a right for all. We live in a turbulent world, in a turbulent society. And so that's why today it is so important for each and every one of us to ask ourselves, what do we do to make that measurable difference to ensure the scholars of today are the leaders of tomorrow? So without further ado, I'm going to ask you, just quickly, all of you to introduce yourselves, and then I've got a series of questions that I want to kind of debate with you. So starting at the front.
Hello, my name is Miranda Moofeather and I'm at the University of York.
Hello, my name is Salome Agba-Joseph. I'm at the University of Manchester.
Hello, my name is Cowrie OBE and I'm a student at the University of Edinburgh.
Hi, I'm Tonge and I'm a student at the University of Bath. Hi, I'm AstraZeneca and I go to King's College London.
Hi, I'm Kayode Akinrinlalo and I study at the University of Leicester.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mariana Fatimbalo and I study in the University in Hull.
Hi everyone, I'm Shania Ra and I'm a student at Newcastle University.
So Shania, can we just stay with you? We've been talking about a sense of belonging. Can you maybe talk us through, what does a sense of belonging mean for you from your lived experience?
A sense of belonging to me is a space of inclusivity and where everyone feels welcome, they're all included, everyone's treated fairly. In terms of bringing together different cultures and different ideas and having a space of no judgment.
Thank you. And could you just pass the mic down? We've got another one there which you want to use. Yes.
Well, a sense of belonging for me, it's being seen, it's being valued and being recognised and heard. And for me, Cowrie Scholars made me feel seen, valued, and it was like a vital part of like the additional confidence that I need. For example, the time of applying to university, I didn't think I would be able to be in the position I am today without Cowrie Scholars and their support of making, having a, how I can say it, having that support there.
Thank you.
The two words that come to mind when I think of belonging are safety and comfortability. And to me, just being safe means I feel like I'm at home, whether it's actually at home or elsewhere, where I'm in a space with other people that may or may not be like-minded, but everyone is appreciative and inclusive of others' opinions, whether or not they agree. And just somewhere where I feel like I can be myself unapologetically, even if we're not from the same backgrounds, even if we didn't have the same experiences, but we have a mutual understanding of respect and sometimes even friendship and being like family.
To me, a sense of belonging means that I'm able to make errors, make mistakes, and still have people call me out on these whilst valuing my experience and what has led me to this pathway. Yes, it's something that I've been able to envision and take part into in my 2 years here so far, and something that I'm willing to carry on in the future. A sense of belonging to me means feeling accepted and valued within a community, and it's being able to express yourself without feeling as if like you're not wanted there and not having that sense of judgment there, which can happen a lot.
For me, a sense of belonging is when I'm not forced to be hyper-aware of my own existence, because I feel like far too often when we're within groups, people are often whittled down to characteristics that make them stand out, whether that be their race, their religion, their sexuality. And although those are all things that you should be proud of, I feel like that shouldn't be what we're solely referred to or referred as. So when I'm allowed to just exist as myself, that's when I feel like I belong.
For me, I would say it's a place where I feel welcomed, a place that I would say is my base, that I can grow from, where I can learn from, where I can share with other people, a place where I can where I feel quite secure in myself, with like no judgment, no question of who I am, and a place where like I can just learn more about myself freely.
To me, a sense of belonging, I think it's to be seen and it's to be heard and it's to be supported by the community that I'm in. I come from the theatre world, I'm studying theatre, and a sense of belonging in that sort of context as well, and at university has been that sort of playing ground for connection and for people to see you for who you are as an individual, to embrace that and to be able to make genuine connection from that.
Thank you. So this theme of belonging is kind of linked to community, safety, but the one most powerful thing that all of you have articulated so beautifully, but in your own words, is being able to be seen in your own right, heard in your own right, and to be able to walk in your own shoes and make those connections. And I guess, you know, we heard earlier on, both from Richard and that wonderful, wonderful debate, what it is to be young again, I thought, is this notion that if it was that simple, if it was that easy, why is there this disconnect? So what I'd like to do is maybe explore a second question, which is really how has the Cowrie helped you, or through your university experience, both informed or actually not necessarily kind of created those very conditions of safety that you've talked about? What might we learn from your experience? I said earlier on that education isn't a rational endeavour, it's an emotional endeavour. So let's start here. If you pass the microphone down, we can kind of meet in the middle again.
So, I started my second year of university last September I mean, and I first moved in to a house off campus with a friend from home and a bunch of his friends. And at first I felt a real sense of belonging in this new community. You know, second year you move out and you hang out with all your friends and you live with your friends. But then it turned out that his friends did not like me very much, and I was harassed and bullied in that accommodation. However, I reached out to Richard, who was in New Zealand at the time, and he replied back with so much support, and I got into contact with my mentor, PJ, and throughout all of the debacle with moving out of off-campus accommodation and then moving back onto on-campus with the university and then going through the whole, bureaucracy with the university, and just, there was a lot going on. Without Cowrie there, I probably would have dropped out. And being faced with adversity and in a place where I felt like I really didn't belong, and then being completely supported by Cowrie as my cornerstone during that whole situation, I felt a sense of belonging, and that I did have a place at the university. And I actually directed a play which won 3 awards last semester. I found a place where I belong, and thank you, Cowrie. I wouldn't have done that without any of you.
Thank you. Let's go to the end.
So far after studying at university for 2 years, I feel like I found a sense of belonging amongst my friends, amongst my peers. However, I don't feel like I can say the same for leaders and kind of academics and educators. Personally this year, second year, I've had a few kind of health issues, and leaders at my university weren't so supportive with that, and the only place I got support was from Cowrie, from my professional mentor. She kind of guided me, she led me, and she also met up with me a few times to kind of discuss any issues that I had. In terms of networking as well, I feel like my university does kind of lack in that sense. And through Cowrie's workshops and through their networking workshops, I feel like I've also managed to pick that up from here instead of getting that from university.
Thank you.
For me personally, I did start a degree earlier before the degree I'm doing right now, and I wasn't able to complete due to financial issues. And when I had to go through that with like the university at that time, they were not supportive. I mean, one of the things that I remember, I am a British born citizen, and I remember having like one of the last meetings with them about how I had to withdraw from the program. And the first thing they said to me was just like, you have 90 days to leave the country. And I was just like, oh, great, thanks, even though I've got a British passport. But it just showed how much they didn't even understand the situation, but they were so quickly to like discard me. And now coming into the university I am now, and along with Cowrie, them two together, because like they've set up, the university has set up like a way that you can talk to Cowrie through them, or you can talk to Cowrie yourself. It's helped me so much because it's made me feel like I can go somewhere and like be heard and say, yeah, I can go to Cowrie, I can go to Richard if something is an issue, I can go to my mentors if there's an issue, I can go to the Cowrie sector in the university if there's an issue. And it's made me have less burdens when I go to class. It's made me feel better about myself and what I am doing, and that I actually belong here and I have a right to be here.
Thank you. Well, I have several moments that I can say that without Cowrie's support, I would be, I don't know where I would be, but I know that I wouldn't be having the experience that I will have today, speaking my story to everyone here. So the very first moment that I felt recognized and seen for my talents was my acceptance letter. Was congratulations, you've made it part of the team. And from that moment, that day was a very difficult day. It was my A-level biology final exam. And after that exam, I went to visit my mom after her chemotherapy treatment. And when I saw that email of that congratulations, I was like, you know what? I can do this. I'm able to go to university, go and study the degree that I want to dive into. And at first, I thought I was not going to get in because it's expensive to move out, and how I'm going to support my siblings, how can I support my mum at the time. But that made me felt seen. And during my second year, unfortunately, I went through grief with my mum passing away. And it was very difficult, but Cowrie was there, Richard was there, helping every step of the way. My university, wow. I can say that University of Hull really, really supported me, was there every moment. Student portal, are you okay? Do you need to talk to someone? Here's student support, here's everything that you need. And that constant bombardment there, it really made me feel seen and valued, that I am their student, Cowrie's, I'm their scholar, and they want me to succeed. And thank you so much, Richard. Honestly, without your recognition, I don't know where I can be.
Thank you.
So I grew up in a very not diverse, racially placed at all, in a farm village in the south of Ireland. So whenever I spoke up about something offending me or being uncomfortable about something, I was often isolated, ostracized, and told that I was overreacting and being hypersensitive. Last academic year at university, there was an instance where some people in my cohort decided to throw an African jungle-themed event to mock Black culture, and I spoke up about that, and I expected to feel isolated again, as I was used to. But then, when I did speak up, I had so much support from other people, and that's something I hadn't experienced until I started university. And with the Cowrie Scholarship, I was able to talk to my academic mentor, and she talked me through the process of like reporting this event and like how to deal with it. And I think, yeah, that was something that I didn't expect, and it was like a monumental moment. It was the first time I ever felt support like that.
Similarly to Mariana, I feel like Cowrie has kind of shaped me and my future. I don't really have many stories about my university. I feel like my uni was just the catalyst. Me attending was just the catalyst to kind of attach me to the Cowrie Foundation. And I don't know if I can say divine intervention, but I took a gap year after A-levels to help out at home and support my mum and siblings while my sister was at university. And this cohort, the one I'm in, was the first of the Cowrie Scholarship, and I just think about how if I decided to go straight into university, where would I be without the Cowrie Scholarship? Because I'm just a journalism student, really, and when I think about my university and what it's actually provided me, I couldn't tell you anything, really. Like, I'm going to graduate and get a degree, but when I add the Cowrie Scholarship to that, and think about all the opportunities I've been granted, even outside the mentorship and the networking opportunities, if we're just strictly talking about the financial aspect, the weight that's lifted off my shoulder, because, not to be all sob story, but you know, I'm a carer for my mum and my brother, and my mum's a single parent, and I took a gap, I went on a study abroad last year, and the financial aspect took a huge weight off my shoulders. And to be fair, I do have quite good money management skills, but I wouldn't have any money to manage if it wasn't for the Cowrie Scholarship. And just studying abroad alone is kind of opened like a new portal of opportunities for me. And I would be graduating this year. Without the Cowrie Scholarship, I'd just be graduating with a journalism degree from the University of Leicester, kind of in a pool of thousands of other students that just studied. I have no networking opportunities. The uni didn't really, not to say they're a bad uni, but I haven't gotten anything from them. Every success and achievement I've got and opportunity I have is because of the Cowrie Scholarship, and genuinely, I don't know where I'd be without this, to say like, all the people I've met, and you know, all the girls on the stage, like who am I to say, like, whether it's 5 years from now, I could be calling any of them to help me for whatever reason. So it's kind of given me that support system, even if we're not necessarily the closest and we don't talk all the time, just the opportunity to make these friendships and to meet these people. Yeah, I am really appreciative of it.
Well, I'm from Bristol, which is very diverse, but my mum fought for me to go to the best schools there are, but those schools are predominantly white, which meant I never really belonged in any school. I genuinely stuck out. Like, if you took a picture of our class, I was the only black girl. I was the only black person there. And this was reflected not only in my classmates, but my teachers. I never had a black teacher, still haven't. And even with the content we learned, I mean, history, we learned about the slave trade, but we didn't learn about black pioneers or inventors. Geography, for my GCSE, the one thing we learned about Africa was the AIDS epidemic, not how incredibly biodiverse it is. When you just look at what I was learning, who I was surrounded by, I thought, I'm never gonna belong at school. Like, this is not for me at all. But I still applied to uni, and I picked the University of Bath, which is a very white area, so I just kind of thought it was going to be the same as secondary. But having Cowrie, it was the first time I've ever fully felt validated. I've never kind of had this external validation where somebody said, oh, do you know what, you deserve to go to university and you deserve it so much we're willing to pay for you. That's pretty cool. But having that, the first time I truly felt oh, I do belong at university, I do belong in education. And the University of Bath was really helpful as well, because what we're learning there, I do criminology, and we did a course on race and racism, and I was learning things about critical race theory and decolonial perspectives, and those are things that never in my wildest dreams would we ever be taught. I mean, they're trying to ban it in America, so I'm kind of lucky to get taught it. And then working on programs like Target Bath, which is trying to include having more black students apply to Bath. I've just never truly felt so included and felt so at peace in education before. So definitely without Cowrie, I wouldn't feel that it was for me, and I probably would have dropped out to be honest. So thanks to Cowrie. I'm on to my third year at uni now, so yeah.
And then to conclude.
To me, when I learned that I got the Cowrie Scholarship, I was in a bit of shock. I had forgotten that I had applied for it, didn't have any expectation of getting it through, and I actually had to get my sister to inform my mom, because I couldn't do it myself, because I was in huge disbelief. But 2 years in now, I can definitely say that we've got a Cowrie family, so it was great to obviously see the girls back face to face today, but also it has enabled me to take part in a lot of opportunities, volunteering back to my community and to prospective students, and really, I guess, advise them on things that weren't available to me when I was their age, but also show them that it's open to us and that we can get to this point. Yes, it will take us a lot of work, and yes, there may be days where we just won't feel like it because too much hassle, too much barriers will come through us, but there will be a point where we will be able to look back at our experience and actually say that we have gone through those hardships, even though they may have taken a lot of our tears, but that we've gotten to that point. So yeah, definitely great thanks to the Cowrie Foundation.
So let me conclude, because I can never do justice to the authenticity, to the transparency, and to the honesty of those stories. And what we've had is a snapshot of leadership in action, leadership, young leadership from the ground upwards. We've had stories that show emotional resilience, but most of all, your stories show how you've found your voice in complex and difficult situations, both at home and at university and in society. And what you've also helped articulate, the Cowrie Foundation on its own can't do all of this work. You, on your own, can't do all of this work. We cannot, year in, year out, ask black students to come to university and then not create inclusive spaces. Inclusive spaces on their terms, not ours. So the Cowrie Foundation, universities, mentors, everybody in this room has played a role in creating that culture, in creating that community, but also creating a provocation to the debate, not to let us off the hook too easily. And so the young leaders of today will be the leaders that stand here in years to come. And your stories resonated with me, and particularly the one of the young person who grew up in Brixton, which I know well. I'm a kid who grew up in the back streets of the East End of London, when the back streets of East End doesn't look like it does now. I'm a kid who was told nothing would ever become of her, and the best that I could do was go and work in a shop. I cheekily said I already do my dad's. I tell that story not to say, girl done good. I tell that story because actually we have a generation in this room that have powerful stories to tell. And so on behalf of the Cowrie Foundation, the universities that have supported this, I have one ask. I hope this time next year we will not only have black mentors, black supporters, we will have supporters of every colour, of every ethnicity, because that's what an equitable world and an equitable society looks like. And you have been instrumental in that journey. Your voice matters, your actions matter, but most of all, your commitment matters. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to move this along. Huge thanks to our scholars. I think Michael Tonge is still in the room. Perfect. And I don't know if Kay was able to get here today. Fantastic. Kayode Akinrinlalo, please come up. Michael, come up. Now you're business leaders, so we can do this relatively quickly. Grab a microphone each. You don't have to sit, you can stand. stand if you want. So I'm delighted to introduce Michael Tonge. So Michael is director, he's Global Graduate Director, PhD Placement Programs R&D from AstraZeneca. AstraZeneca are one of our biggest supporters, so we're really grateful that Michael is here. And the other major supporter we have in the room here today, Kay from Jacobs, Kayode Akinrinlalo. He's the Capture Manager, Growth and Sales, Energy and Power, Jacobs Europe. Okay, so I presume you've flown in for this, or?
I wish no budget for that.
Okay, so what we wanted to do was just ask, so in some ways you probably thought it was pretty obvious what the student perspective would be on a sense of belonging. We were quite keen to find out what the business perspective would be on it and a sense of belonging. And also because it may resonate and may have some relevance to the businesses out here that we also hope will become interested in the Cowrie Scholarship Foundation. So they've got a couple of minutes each. Why should we invest in a sense of belonging in a business context? I start with you, Mike.
Yeah, so you covered a little bit of it at the start in your talk. I think the reason businesses want to invest in a sense of belonging is ultimately it does help to retain talent within the organisation. But beyond that, I guess the other impact is that it does help brand awareness and it helps businesses, in the wider community. But I think for us at AstraZeneca, there are stronger benefits to creating that sense of belonging and the reason why we want to invest in it. And that's that it supports people to feel included in the conversations. They feel they can be themselves within the workplace. And through that, they will collaborate more. Now, we are a scientific organisation. R&D is the core of everything that we do. Collaboration is a huge part of that. And if people feel that they belong and they can collaborate, that will help to drive our productivity. We're also a science and innovation company, so innovation is a key part. And if people, again, feel that they belong, they can bring their ideas to the table, which may be the next scientific breakthroughs. They might be the things that help to generate the life-changing medicines that we hope to develop for our patients. And ultimately, again, the final point that you said is that the statistics show having a diverse and inclusive workforce, decisions that are made are better. And so, all of that will help us to drive our business forward. So I think that is the reason why we want to invest in a sense of belonging, because it drives so many other things behind that.
Thanks, Mike. Okay.
Taking all my points.
They didn't have a chance to confer before.
I think one of the key things for me, it's just the right thing to do. I kind of don't like using the data approach. It is still very valid, but it almost feels like you need to use numbers to back up the fact that it's just the right thing to do to have representation. I think, at a very bare minimum level, we should at least try to shadow and mirror what we see in society. Especially here in London, we do see a mix of different backgrounds, whether it's ethnicity or other things. So why not, at the very bare minimum, just try to shadow and reflect that in business, because it is the right thing to do. And like you said, the numbers do support. There is more innovation, there is ultimately you do get more profit from having more diversity within the business. So again, that's another reason why it's the right thing to do. I guess another point is, it's a good chance to embed an inclusive culture, and from there it kind of helps to bring in new talent. So if you see a company that is doing it right, that's doing the right thing, bringing in a diverse culture into a business, you will get top talent actually wanting to move and migrate towards your business. So again, that kind of emphasizes the point that it's going to help with profits and things like that.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's perhaps reflect the other way around. What does a sense of belonging mean, for example, for Jacobs? So let's say that you can't steal all of them. Kay, why don't you start? What does a sense of belonging mean from Jacobs?
So I think the first word that comes to mind is authenticity. So something that was touched upon earlier by an earlier panel, it's kind of the opposite of code switching to me. It's a place where you feel like you can completely eradicate or at least minimize the amount of code switching you need to do, which again is another big thing we're going to talk about today. That's a huge keyword and a huge thing that a lot of minorities and other people from different backgrounds kind of struggle with today in society. I think another part is just to feel integral to the business and to feel like you actually belong here and you feel the plans and the very ethos and the values of the company is embodied in what you do. So being able to bring the true, authentic self to the business and seeing that, you know, this actually lines up to some of the values of the business, it just makes you feel like you are valued, you are welcome, and you are in the right place to be. And you can actually do great things and, you know, just fulfill your talent, fulfill your potential.
Thank you. Michael?
Yeah, I think, you know, listening to the panel of the scholars earlier, I think everything that was said there, you know, is exactly what I think a sense of belonging means in a business context as well. It's having that environment where people really do feel they can be their authentic self, they can bring their ideas to the table, they're listened to, they're supported by the leadership to bring those ideas. You know, it isn't just a case of bringing in diversity and saying, look, we have diversity, but we don't listen to them. It's about having that opportunity to share the ideas and have them listened and potentially actioned as well. You know, very specifically for AstraZeneca, obviously we want an organisation that reflects the communities that we work in and the patient populations that we are trying to deliver those life-changing medicines. And I think that's really important because we need to understand those perspectives. And I think certainly when we think about the Black community and the distrust potentially within the pharmaceutical and medical practices, hearing those thoughts is really important in terms of you know, how we can, you know, improve patients' lives. So there's very specific things in that, but I think overall it is just having that organisational structure that really supports everybody within the organisation to be themselves, share their ideas, feel comfortable in doing that. And it does start with our leadership. Our leadership need to be supported. We need to have the relevant training to be able to pass that down through the rest of the organisation. But it does take all of us to contribute to creating that culture, that environment where we can all then ultimately thrive.
Wonderful. Very short, but I would like a round of applause, please, for Michael Tonge, Director of Global. And Kayode Akinrinlalo, Country Manager, Growth Sales, Energy Power Jacobs. Thank you both. Time is against us. We do want to close by 2 because some people do have to leave. What I would like to do is give you the opportunity, if there's any quick questions anybody wants to ask us before. I'm going to ask Martin Ephson, our ambassador, to come and give a 2-3 minute summary for us. I think that's all right, Martin. But if there's any quick questions that people would like to ask about the foundation or to our scholars, we have our trustees here, and we have our ambassadors here. So Celia's here, we have Liz, we have Kenna. So any quick questions somebody wants to ask, especially our new potential business partners, I hope. Please, just shout.
Hi everyone, I'm Ben. I'm a diversity and equity inclusion partner at Oliver Agency. I'm also a graduate from University of York a long time ago. So I'm here on 2 fronts. As an alumni, amazing to hear the stories and see how that you lead through. From my experiences, sense of belonging and obviously that, the sense of exclusion potentially came from outside of the university as well. So I think that's obviously missing a bit from the discussion today, because universities are bubbles, but they're also microcosms of the society around them. So I was curious to hear more about the experiences of students, for example, in York or campus universities, actually within the cities itself. How can we cultivate that sense of belonging so that people don't find microaggressions and conscious bias or other forms of discrimination actually outside of the universities within the localities? I'm curious to find out what Cowrie Foundation is doing with universities on that front.
So I think we get the scholars to give a viewpoint, but certainly what we're trying to do is to ensure that the universities understand the challenges our scholars face, because that's part of the challenge, or part of the problem is that they're not really aware of some of the microaggressions, which are not really microaggressions, if we're quite honest. And the need, we talk about a safe space, and the need to be truly included, okay? Because it's one thing to have diversity, but if you don't have true inclusion, it doesn't count for anything. And I think that's part of the challenge we have with not just universities, but in the NHS, within law, within finance, within any of those communities. It's being able to provide a safe sounding space and board for all of that interaction to occur. And that doesn't happen. And having, for example, bubbles where it's everyone who's, and I hate the expression, will put everybody who's either BME or will have BAME, which is even worse because it comes down to us, or just white safe spaces, all of those are probably not the way to go. And so it's actually trying to have real conversations where people won't be judged, and conversations, I can only talk because I'm an academic, I can only talk from an academic perspective. It's trying to make sure those safe spaces really exist and that they're not token. But it's much better coming from a scholar who live in this.
Yes, hi, it's nice to see another University of York person, that's great. I think for me as a student, and also from the year that I've been through, especially last year, it's the encouragement, and it's definitely the one-to-one support, even like from Richard, from PJ, from so many other people like Cowrie when I was going through that crisis, to say, hey, go out and enjoy university, don't let this one thing completely ruin your experience. It was the encouragement, and it was also the support to get through all the practical side as well, especially like my academics. I feel like without the one-on-one support and without somebody to literally be there with me whilst I was going through this experience at uni, because my mum's in Brighton, and what's she going to do, come up to you and take me home? No. So to have somebody there on call to guide me through, it allowed me to get an 80 in that semester and a 70. So I not only thrived academically through the support of Dr. Tonge, and that's another person from Cowrie, but that's what this foundation does. They don't just leave you behind and say, okay, let's try and fix this. No, they literally carried me through. And when I saw the statistics on the board about so many black students dropping out, like, was it 70%? Without Cowrie, I would have been part of that. I really do think. So I hope that answers your question.
One very short, quick question, and then I'm going to ask Martin to come up.
Alright, I'm going to keep it there. Where's the black boys, the black women on the stage? I was wondering if they're off today or something.
What can I say? We do have a few male Cowrie scholars, but what can I say? They stood up, they came, they were here. So, round of applause. If I can call Martin Ephson, Director of Fairboy, Ambassador, he's done so much for us. Just to give a couple of minutes of applause, Martin.
I'm not sure I can give a summary business perspective, but what I would like to do is first of all thank Richard once again for a very thought-provoking and uplifting event he's organised again. He seems to be able to do these very, very easily. Well, thank you so much, Richard. It's wonderful. Just a quick word about one of Richard's mistakes, and that is he doesn't need people like me to be ambassadors of the Cowrie Foundation. The students are the best ambassadors anybody could ever want. They're absolutely outstanding. So, and I would just like to really share with you a little bit of my own experience. It was 50 years ago this month that I did my A-levels. The ethnic landscape of the UK at the time was a very different place. And I, throughout my life, have been asked, where are you from? I've generally not had a problem with that, because one, I'm proud of my Anglo-Ghanaian heritage, and secondly, I'm immensely proud of being Black British and my, along with everybody else's contribution to the cultural diverse landscape that is Britain today. And I think, as I say, it's a macro point, and within that you've got a lot of things that go on throughout your journey. But I think we all here have made a contribution. The contribution is getting larger as our voice gets louder, and we're lucky in many ways to be Black British. that context, we can all take some sort of positives, and that we don't have to be anxious about who we are, where we are. We have a place, we have a voice, and we're making great inroads into what is a really fantastic country, despite all the things that go on to complain about. We're all here, and we're all making progress. Now, just to very, very quickly on the business bit, I didn't really think this through at all. I don't have a summary business perspective, but I have had the privilege of being relatively successful in my business life, employing a lot of people over many years. And I think it was, as Kay was saying earlier on, it's not about the numbers, it's about reflecting the cultural and the ethnic diversity in wherever you happen to be and where you happen to be working. It would be wholly wrong to be in an area of Britain which is 10% black and you have no black employees. How can that be relevant to what you're doing in any capacity, whether it's manufacturing spaceships or making sandwiches? You have to have a relationship to the community in which you operate, and that's on all levels and representing all stakeholders. And stakeholders are your workforce, your supply chain, absolutely everything comes into play, and you cannot do any of these things to the exclusion of any one particular group or channel. It doesn't work. So I think that's all I really have to say. I have been an equal opportunity employer throughout my working life, since I've been employing people, but sometimes it's very, very difficult to accommodate all the sort of diversity that you like. For instance, my largest business was down in Dorset. We employed nearly 300 people, nearly 400 people, and I'm ashamed to say there were very few black people, but other than me, there were no people in the local town who happened to be from minorities, be they Indian, be they African, be they Caribbean, so it's just the way it was. But with the graduates, education is the key, and then people will travel for the right jobs, and the higher up the sort of food chain you are, the more mobility there is. And it was always a disappointment to me that when we had senior management positions, how few black people would be able to apply. One, because they haven't had the opportunity to get the qualifications required. That's changing, thankfully. And two, just the whole wherewithal to be able to engage and make the decision to move from their sort of communities was much more challenging. But that's all changing, and this is all fantastic, and you're making a huge contribution to that, Richard. Thank you.
Thanks, Martin. Okay, so we have the room till 3. There's no need to rush, but I know that some people needed to leave, and spare any plushes walking from the front to the back. I just need to thank a few people. At the very back is Dean Atterley from King's College, London, and Dean has been instrumental today with his team and the senior management team in allowing this to occur, and so I'm really grateful to Dean. I'll keep this really short, but I'd like to thank Hugo and Esther from DebateMate and all of the debate team. So, Esther, Hugo, all of these wonderful people down there who did this and practiced, and I don't know how much time you spent on this, Ikenna and Celia, I don't know how much time you spent on this, the Cowrie Scholars who came along, Professor Trehan from, I can't see you, who came across from York. So, just huge thanks to everyone involved. Really, really appreciate your time. For the new businesses in the room, we're here till 3. I don't think you're allowed to leave without talking to us. But I hope you have the rest of you have a great day. And as I say, there is still some food left, but thank you all very much for coming, and we'll do it all again next year.